I don't think I'll ever go camping alone again. I used to love it, the quiet, the fresh air, the way the world felt bigger when I was deep in the woods, miles from anyone. It was my escape from the stress of life, a way to reset. But that last trip, that changed everything. I had planned it for weeks. I wanted somewhere remote, somewhere I wouldn't run into families with kids or groups of hikers. I found a spot in a national forest that was well off the beaten path. It wasn't an official campsite, just a clearing I saw on an old topographic map, about 5 miles from the nearest trailhead. It was exactly what I wanted. No roads, no cell service, no people. Just me and the wilderness. I left early in the morning, car packed with everything I needed: tent, sleeping bag, enough food for 3 days, a water filter, and my old hunting knife. I had bear spray too, just in case, but I wasn't too worried. I'd camped in bear country before. The drive took about 4 hours, the last hour on a dirt road full of potholes. I didn't pass a single car. When I finally reached the trailhead, there was no one else around. I parked, locked up, and checked my map one last time. I set off into the woods, following an unmarked route I had planned on my GPS before losing service. The trees were thick and the air was cool. It was exactly what I had hoped for: quiet, peaceful, undisturbed. But a few miles in, I got this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone. I stopped and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the wind moving through the trees. I shook it off. Probably just my mind playing tricks on me. Happens sometimes when you're alone in the woods. I kept walking. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was starting to dip low. The spot was perfect, flat ground. A small stream nearby for water, plenty of firewood. I dropped my pack and stretched, taking in the silence. Felt good. I set up camp quickly, pitching my tent and getting a fire going. I made dinner, sat back, and watched the sky darken. The stars were incredible out here. No light pollution, just endless blackness filled with thousands of tiny, bright points. I should have felt at peace, but I didn't. That feeling was back, like I was being watched. I kept glancing at the tree line, expecting to see. What? An animal? Person? There was nothing, just darkness beyond the fire's glow. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was alone. That was the whole point. I put out the fire, crawled into my tent, and zipped it shut. I woke up to a sound, a rustling noise, soft, slow, close. I lay still, holding my breath, listening. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a small animal. It was something moving deliberately, just outside my tent. I reached for my knife, gripping it tight. The rustling stopped. I waited. Then, light footsteps moving away, fading into the trees. I stayed awake for hours, listening, but nothing else happened. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted off, still holding the knife. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Sunlight filtered through the trees. Birds chirped. My gear was undisturbed. Had it been an animal? A raccoon sniffing around my tent? That had to be it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been out there, watching me. I ate a quick breakfast and decided to explore the area. I followed the stream for a while, checking my surroundings. The forest was dense, the ground covered in fallen leaves and pine needles. No signs of other people, no footprints. I circled back to camp, telling myself I was overreacting. I spent the afternoon reading, gathering firewood, trying to enjoy the solitude. But that feeling never went away. I built a bigger fire that night. I told myself it was for warmth, but the truth was, I didn't like the darkness pressing in around me. The fire made me feel safer, like it was keeping whatever was out there at a distance. But when I finally put it out and crawled into my tent, the fear crept back in. I lay there listening, waiting, then footsteps, slow, deliberate, closer than before. I held my breath, gripping my knife so hard my hand ached. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent. I could hear breathing, not an animal, person. My mind raced. What do they want? Why are they just standing there? Should I say something? Should I make a run for it? Then movement, not away, around. circling the tent. I wanted to scream, to do anything, but I was frozen. Then, just as suddenly as they came, the footsteps faded into the woods. I lay there, shaking, waiting for them to return, but they didn't. As soon as the sun was up, I packed. Fast. I didn't eat, didn't make coffee, just stuffed everything into my bag and started hiking back to my car. I moved quickly, heart pounding with every step. Then, a mile in, I saw them. Footprints. Not mine. Fresh. Deep. Leading from my camp. I wasn't alone out here. Someone had been watching me, following me. My stomach turned. I moved even faster. I didn't stop to rest. Didn't look back. When I finally reached my car, I almost cried. I grabbed my keys, fumbled to unlock the door, then froze. The driver's side door was open. I knew I had locked it. Inside, my glove box was open. My gear was scattered. Someone had been in my car. Had they been waiting for me? I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled onto the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. A figure, standing at the tree-line, watching me. I didn't stop. I didn't even breathe until I hit the highway. I told the rangers everything. They sent someone out, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of anyone. But I know what I saw. I know someone was out there, and they were watching me the whole time. I haven't gone camping alone since, and I never will again. I should have picked a different place to camp. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I had gone on solo trips before, plenty of them. I liked the isolation, the quiet, the feeling of being completely removed from the world. But this trip was different. I wanted somewhere deep, somewhere untouched. I had spent weeks looking at maps, trying to find the most remote area I could reach without needing a permit or running into other people. That's how I found it. A small valley in the middle of a national forest, miles from any marked trails. It was perfect, or at least that's what I thought. The drive took most of the morning. The last hour was on a dirt road that barely looked used. It was narrow, full of potholes, and lined with thick trees that made me feel like I was driving into another world. By the time I reached the spot where I planned to park, I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. No people, no signs of anyone, just me and miles of untouched forest. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the quiet. No traffic, no voices, no cell service. Just the wind in the trees. I got out, grabbed my pack, and locked the car. I double-checked my map and compass. I had about 5 miles to hike before I reached my campsite, a small clearing near a stream. The first mile was easy. The trees were tall, the ground soft with pine needles. But as I went deeper, the forest changed. The trees grew denser, the air heavier. The quiet felt different now, like the whole place was holding its breath. I brushed it off and kept moving. By the time I reached my campsite, the sun was low. The clearing was just as I imagined. A flat stretch of grass beside a slow-moving stream, surrounded by trees. It was perfect. I set up my tent, built a fire, and boiled water for coffee. As I sat by the fire, watching the sky darken, I felt uneasy. I told myself it was just the isolation. Being alone in the woods can mess with your head. But that feeling, like I wasn't really alone, never left. As the fire burned down to embers, I heard something. A branch snapping. Not close, but not far either. Somewhere in the trees. I sat up, listening. The fire crackled. The stream trickled over rocks. The wind rustled the leaves. Then another snap. Closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it toward the sound. Nothing. Just trees. It was probably an animal. A deer, maybe. I tried to ignore it and crawled into my tent. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not crashing through the brush like an animal. Something moving carefully, deliberately. I held my breath. The steps stopped just beyond my tent. For the first time, I felt real fear. My mind raced. Was it a person? Had someone followed me? I gripped the knife in my sleeping bag, heart pounding. I listened. Nothing. Just silence. I don't know how long I lay there, waiting, but eventually, I must have drifted off. When I woke up, it was still dark. The fire was out. The air was cold. Something was wrong. I reached for my flashlight and froze. The flap of my tent was open. I was sure I had zipped it shut. I sat up slowly, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. I shined the beam outside. My backpack was open. My gear was scattered. Someone had been in my camp. I scrambled out of the tent, scanning the trees. My breath came fast and shallow. Then I saw it. Footprints. Fresh, deep footprints in the dirt. Not mine. And they led back into the trees. Someone had been watching me. Someone had been inside my tent while I slept. I packed up fast. I didn't eat, didn't even make coffee. Just stuffed everything into my pack and started hiking back toward my car. The whole way I felt it, that same awful feeling of being watched. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my skin crawl. Then, about a mile from my car, I saw something that made my stomach drop. More footprints, fresh, leading in the same direction I was going. Someone was ahead of me. I stopped, gripping my knife so tight my hand shook. My mind raced. Had they been waiting for me? Had they known I would leave? I moved slowly now, every step careful. My mouth was dry. My heart pounded. Then, through the trees, I saw it. My car. Relief flooded me. I almost ran toward it. But then I stopped. Something was wrong. The driver's side door was open. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. I took a step closer. The car was empty. No one inside. But my gear from the glove box was scattered across the seats. Someone had been in my car. I didn't wait. I jumped in, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I shoved the key into the ignition. The engine turned over. Then, in my rearview mirror, I saw movement. A figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching me. I didn't think. I threw the car into drive and tore down the dirt road, tires kicking up dust. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I drove until I was back on pavement, until I had service again. I pulled over and called the ranger station. I told them everything. They sent someone to check the area, but they never found anyone. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been there. But I know what I saw. I know someone was out there, and they were watching me the whole time. I should have never gone camping that weekend. It was supposed to be a solo trip. I needed time away from everything: work, people, noise. Just me, a tent, and miles of forest. That was the plan. But plans don't always go the way you expect. The drive took longer than I thought. I had picked a remote spot deep in a national forest, about a 5-hour drive from home. The last hour was on a narrow dirt road, winding through thick trees with no sign of people anywhere. No houses, no parked cars, just endless forest. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun was already dipping low. I grabbed my pack and locked my car, double-checking that I had everything. My phone had lost service an hour ago, but I wasn't worried. I had a map, a compass, and a plan. The hike to my campsite was about 3 miles in. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind in the trees, just the crunch of my boots on the dirt path. The deeper I went, the heavier the silence felt. I reached my site just as the last light faded. It was a small clearing next to a slow-moving creek. I pitched my tent, built a fire, and made a quick meal. As I ate, I felt something off, the kind of feeling you get when you're being watched. I scanned the trees with my headlamp but saw nothing, just darkness beyond the flickering firelight. I told myself I was being paranoid. Being alone in the woods can mess with your head. I crawled into my tent and zipped it shut. The sounds of the fire cracking outside faded as I pulled my sleeping bag over me. The last thing I remember before falling asleep was the distant sound of branches snapping. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not an animal. Too heavy, too slow. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped just outside my tent. I could hear breathing, deep, steady breaths. I lay there, heart pounding. Then the sound of fabric moving. My tent. Someone was brushing against it. I sat up, every muscle in my body frozen. My mind raced. Was it a person? A bear? Should I yell? Should I stay quiet? The breathing continued, steady and deliberate. Then, slowly, the zipper on my tent began to move. I reacted without thinking. I grabbed my knife and lunged forward, slamming my hand against the tent wall and yelling as loud as I could. The breathing stopped. The footsteps retreated, slow, deliberate steps fading into the trees. I sat there, shaking, knife clenched in my fist. I waited, listening, but whatever it was, didn't come back. For the rest of the night, I stayed awake, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow outside the tent seemed to move. To first light, I packed up fast. I didn't eat, didn't even make coffee. Just stuffed everything into my pack and started back toward the car. The woods felt different now, more hostile. Every snapped twig made me spin around, scanning the trees. I felt watched the entire way. About halfway back, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Footprints, not mine. Fresh, deep prints in the dirt, leading toward my campsite. Then turning back, someone had followed me in. Someone had stood outside my tent. Someone had walked away when I yelled. I walked faster, almost running by the time I reached the car. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking, and jumped inside. I locked the doors before I even started the engine. As I pulled away, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. A figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. I drove until I had service, then called the ranger station. I told them what happened. They took my name, asked some questions, but they didn't sound surprised. "You're not the first," one of them said before hanging up. I never went back. I never camped alone again. Somewhere, deep in those woods, someone is still out there, watching, waiting. I've always been someone who enjoys solitude. The world is loud, people are exhausting, and I've always found peace in being alone. That's why I started camping by myself years ago. Being deep in the woods, away from everything, was the only time I felt like I could breathe. But that changed after my last trip. It started like any other. I had a long weekend off work, and I decided to take a solo trip into Lost Creek National Forest. It was a place I had been to before, but this time I wanted to go deeper, far beyond any trails or campsites, deep into the untouched parts of the forest. I packed light but smart. A tent, sleeping bag, a small stove, knife, flashlight, extra batteries, and just enough food for 4 days. I carried a water filter so I could drink from the streams and had a map and compass, even though I knew the area well. No phone. I never brought one. That was the whole point, to disappear for a while. The drive took nearly 5 hours. The last stretch was on an old logging road barely wide enough for my truck. No signs, no trail markers, just endless trees. I parked at a small clearing, took a deep breath of the cool autumn air, and started hiking in. My plan was simple. Hike in about 10 miles, find a good spot near water, and set up camp. The hike was peaceful. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. No people, no roads, no sounds except for the wind through the trees and the occasional rustling of small animals. I had no idea I was already being watched. I found the perfect campsite just before sunset. A small clearing with soft ground for my tent and a narrow creek a few yards away. Plenty of wood for a fire, plenty of space. I set up my tent, started a fire, and ate a quick meal as the last light faded from the sky. I stretched out by the fire, staring up at the stars, listening to the crackling flames. It was peaceful. Then I noticed something. The forest was silent. At first, I didn't think much of it. But after a few minutes, the silence became impossible to ignore. No wind, no crickets, no distant rustling of animals, just complete, suffocating stillness. I told myself it was normal. Maybe the temperature had dropped too quickly, or maybe I was overthinking it. But then I heard it, a sound, a branch snapping, far off, deep in the trees. I sat up, every muscle in my body tensing. I listened, straining my ears. Nothing. I forced myself to relax. The forest is full of noises. A deer, a raccoon, something stepping on a dead branch. I wasn't alone out here, but that didn't mean I was in danger. I banked the fire, crawled into my tent, and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. But I didn't sleep well. I woke up feeling off. Maybe it was just the stiffness in my back, or maybe it was the way my brain still clung to the eerie silence from the night before. I stepped out of my tent, stretched, and looked around. Then I saw them. Footprints. Not boot prints. Not animal tracks. Bare feet. They were all around my campsite. My skin went cold. I scanned the trees, my heart pounding. But there was nothing. I forced myself to think rationally. Maybe a hiker had passed through. Maybe they saw my camp and left. But why would someone be walking around out here without shoes? I felt sick. But instead of packing up and leaving, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I had hiked in deep, 10 miles from my truck. There was no way someone had just randomly stumbled across my camp, right? I spent the day trying to shake the feeling. I went for a hike, collected firewood, and did my best to ignore the unease crawling up my spine. But the feeling never left. I kept catching myself looking over my shoulder, scanning the trees, listening. And that night, when I sat by the fire, I felt it stronger than ever. I wasn't alone. I barely ate. I wasn't hungry anymore. I kept my fire burning longer than usual, staring into the darkness beyond the flickering flames, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Eventually, I crawled into my tent, knife in my hand. I lay awake for what felt like hours, listening. Then, at some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up to the sound of something brushing against my tent. My entire body went rigid. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was deliberate, slow, like someone was running their fingers along the fabric of my tent. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My fingers tightened around my knife. Then I heard it, breathing, just outside, shallow, slow. Then footsteps, soft, bare feet, circling my tent. Once, twice, then silence. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? Eventually, the sky began to lighten, and the sounds of the forest slowly returned. Birds, wind, life. Whoever had been out there was gone. I packed up immediately. My hands were shaking. I didn't care about breakfast, didn't care about breaking camp properly. I shoved everything into my pack and started hiking out. I didn't run, but I moved fast. Every crunch of leaves under my boots made me jump. The feeling of being watched never left. At some point, I saw something ahead on the trail. I stopped cold. More footprints, bare feet, leading the same way I was going. My stomach dropped. Someone had been ahead of me, watching me. I pushed forward, heart pounding, gripping my knife so tight my fingers ached. Then finally, I saw my truck. I broke into a jog, unlocking the door so fast my keys nearly slipped from my hand. I jumped in, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Then I saw them, footprints, leading out of the woods, stopping just feet away from my truck. Whoever they were, they had been here, watching, waiting. I drove away so fast I nearly skidded off the road. I never went back. I never camped alone again, and I don't think I ever will. I don't camp alone anymore. I used to love it. Getting away from everything, the peace of being deep in the woods, miles from the noise of the world. There's something about being alone in nature that makes you feel small in the best way. Like nothing matters except the trees and the wind and the dirt under your boots. I thought I knew the risks. I thought I was prepared. I thought I was careful. I was wrong. The start of the trip. It was late September, the perfect time for camping. The air was crisp, but not too cold, and the leaves were starting to turn. I had a few days off work and decided to take one last solo trip before winter set in. I chose a spot deep in a national forest, well off any marked trails. I had been there once before, years ago, and I remembered how quiet it was, how untouched. That's what I wanted, complete isolation. I packed light but smart. My tent, sleeping bag, a small stove, my knife, a flashlight with extra batteries, and enough food for 4 days. I carried a water filter so I could drink straight from the streams. No phone. I never brought one. That was the whole point, to be off the grid. I parked my truck at the edge of an old logging road and hiked in about 10 miles. It took most of the day, but the weather was perfect, and the deeper I got, the more relaxed I felt. I found a great spot near a small clearing with a creek nearby for water. The ground was soft but dry, and there was plenty of wood for a fire. I set up camp quickly, pitching my tent, gathering firewood, and making a small meal as the sun dipped below the trees. That first night was peaceful. The fire crackled, and the night air smelled like pine and damp earth. I ate, stretched out by the fire, and watched the stars come out. I felt good. I had no idea I was being watched. I woke up suddenly, my body on high alert. I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep, but something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. If you've spent enough time in the woods, you know that silence isn't normal. Even at night, there's always some sound, crickets, the rustling of leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl. But now, nothing. Just an unnatural stillness pressing in from all sides. I lay there listening. Then I heard it. A single footstep. Not an animal. Not a branch falling. A footstep. Close. My heart pounded. I reached for my knife, gripping it tight. I didn't move. Another footstep. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. Circling my tent. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Someone was out there. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. My mind raced. Had I passed someone on the way in? No, I had been completely alone. No other cars at the trailhead, no signs of recent campers. Then who the hell was out here? I stayed awake for hours, listening. The footsteps stopped eventually, but the silence remained. I didn't sleep again that night. By sunrise, the forest felt normal again. Birds chirped, the wind rustled the leaves. It was almost enough to convince me I had imagined the whole thing. Almost. Then I stepped outside my tent and saw the footprints. They were all around my campsite. Bare feet. Human. The prints circled my tent in a slow, deliberate pattern. They weren't mine. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I forced myself to think rationally. Maybe some lost hiker had stumbled on my camp in the middle of the night. Maybe they had been confused, disoriented. But why wouldn't they say anything? I should have left right then, packed up and hiked straight back to my truck. But I didn't. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that if I left now, I'd be giving in to paranoia. I was an idiot. I tried to shake off the unease. I spent the day hiking, fishing in the creek, doing normal camping things. By the time the sun started setting, I felt better. I built my fire a little bigger that night, ate my food closer to the flames. I told myself everything was fine. I was wrong. I woke up to the sound of something brushing against my tent. My eyes flew open. My heart pounded in my ears. Then came the whisper of fabric against fabric, like someone was running a hand along the outside of my tent. Slow, deliberate. I gripped my knife so tight my fingers ached. Then came the footsteps, right outside. Slow, careful, circling. I could hear my own breathing, too loud, too fast. My chest felt tight. Then silence. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I don't know, but I never heard them leave. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there, knife in hand, waiting for morning. I packed up at first light. My hands were shaking as I shoved everything into my pack. I kept scanning the trees, my gut screaming at me to move faster. When I finally slung my pack over my shoulder and started the hike back, I forced myself not to run. I kept looking over my shoulder. Every sound made me jump. I felt watched. I made it to my truck in record time. But as I unlocked the door, I noticed something in the dirt nearby. Footprints, bare feet, leading back into the trees. I never camped alone again. That trip changed me. I used to think I was safe in the woods, that being alone meant being free. But I was never alone out there. Someone was watching me, and whoever they were, they wanted me to know it. I still camp, but never alone. Never without a gun. And never in the same place twice. I don't know who was out there with me that night. I don't want to know. I've always loved being out in nature. There's something about being deep in the woods, away from everything, that feels right. No noise, no people, no distractions. Just you, the trees, and the open sky. For years, I went on solo camping trips, never had an issue. I knew how to pack smart, how to set up camp, how to keep myself safe. I wasn't some amateur hiker who wandered off trails and got lost. I always planned my trips carefully. That's why I can't explain what happened on my last trip. I had taken a few days off work, wanting to clear my head. Life had been stressful and I needed to get away. I picked a remote spot deep in a national forest, miles away from any designated campgrounds. That's how I liked it. Complete solitude. I packed light but efficiently. Tent, sleeping bag, a small stove, my knife, and a flashlight with extra batteries. Enough food for 3 days, plus a water filter so I could drink from streams. I didn't bring my phone. I never did. That was the whole point, to disconnect. The hike in was perfect. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. The forest was thick with pine trees, the ground soft under my boots. The air smelled clean, fresh, untouched. I walked for about 5 hours before I found the perfect spot. A small clearing surrounded by tall trees, with a narrow creek nearby for water. The ground was level and there was plenty of wood for a fire. I set up camp quickly, pitching my tent and getting everything in order before dark. As the sun dipped below the trees, I started a small fire and cooked a simple meal. The only sounds were the crackling flames and the occasional rustling in the bushes from small animals moving around. Then, at some point, the forest went silent. If you've spent enough time in the woods, you know that silence isn't normal. Even at night, there's always something: crickets, owls, the wind through the branches. But suddenly, everything just stopped. No insects, no wind, no movement, just dead silence. I felt it then, that creeping unease. Like something was off, like something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I had been alone for hours and my mind was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I scanned the trees, my eyes searching the darkness. Nothing, just the flickering light from my fire casting long shadows. I forced myself to relax. I wasn't new to this. I had camped in total isolation before. My brain was just overreacting to the quiet. I banked the fire, crawled into my tent, and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. Then I woke up. First, I didn't know why. I just knew something had pulled me out of sleep. My body was alert, my heart pounding. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, just outside my tent. My breath caught in my throat. I lay completely still, listening. The steps were careful, almost cautious. Not an animal. Too heavy, too controlled. Someone was out there. My knife was within reach, and I wrapped my fingers around the handle, gripping it tight. I kept my breathing shallow, barely moving. The footsteps circled my tent. Once, twice, then they stopped. Silence. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, my body rigid, every muscle tense. But whoever or whatever it was, they never came closer, never touched the tent, never spoke. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I must have drifted off. When I woke up, the fire was out. The morning light seeped through the trees, and everything felt normal again. Birds chirped, the wind rustled the leaves. It was like nothing had happened, except for the footprints. They were all around my tent, deep impressions in the dirt, bare feet, and they weren't mine. My stomach turned. My hands felt cold, even in the morning sun. I crouched down, studying the prints. They circled my tent in a slow, deliberate pattern. Someone had been watching me. I packed up my gear as fast as I could, shoving everything into my pack. I kept my knife in my hand, my pulse hammering in my ears. The hike back felt different. Every sound made me flinch. Every rustling leaf, every snapping twig. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone standing there, watching me. But the woods were empty. At least that's what I told myself. When I finally reached my car, I exhaled, my hands shaking as I unlocked the door. I threw my pack in the back, climbed in, and locked the doors. Then I saw them, footprints, there, leading away from my car. I never camped alone again. I don't go camping alone anymore. I used to love it. Being out in the wilderness, no one around for miles, just the sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional rustling of wildlife in the underbrush. It was peaceful, cleared my head in a way nothing else could. But that was before I realized how stupid I had been to think I was ever truly alone out there. It happened 3 summers ago. I had taken a week off work, wanting to disconnect from everything. No emails, no phone calls, no city noise. Just me, my gear, and the woods. I picked a spot deep in the national forest, far from any campgrounds or marked trails. I had hiked the area before, knew it well enough to navigate without getting lost. I had everything I needed: tent, sleeping bag, food, a small stove, my knife, and a flashlight with extra batteries. I didn't bring a gun. I never thought I'd need one. The hike in was perfect. The deeper I got into the woods, the quieter the world became. No traffic noise, no people, just the crunch of my boots on the ground and the occasional bird overhead. I walked for about 4 hours until I found the perfect clearing. A small, flat patch of earth surrounded by tall pine trees, with a little stream running nearby. The air smelled like pine and damp earth, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees. I set up camp quickly, getting my tent pitched and gathering enough wood to keep a fire going through the night. I cooked a simple meal, ate while staring into the flames, and leaned back against a fallen log, enjoying the solitude. It was around sunset when I first felt it, that strange shift in the air. It wasn't anything obvious, just a small, creeping feeling in the back of my mind, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I told myself it was nothing, just my brain adjusting to the quiet. But the longer I sat there, the stronger the feeling became. I looked around, scanning the tree line. Nothing, just shadows stretching across the ground as the last of the daylight faded. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. I told myself it was just because I was alone. I had camped solo dozens of times, but something about that night felt different. I forced myself to ignore it. I banked the fire for the night, crawled into my tent, and zipped the flap shut. The inside of the tent was warm from the day's heat, and I stretched out in my sleeping bag, staring up at the nylon ceiling, listening to the quiet. Then I woke up. I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep, but my body was suddenly alert. My heart was pounding, my breathing shallow. I lay completely still, listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, careful, just outside my tent. My blood turned to ice. They weren't loud, just the soft crunch of someone stepping on dry leaves. Whoever it was, they were trying to be quiet. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, listening. The steps moved around my tent, pausing every few seconds, like they were listening too. I reached slowly for my knife, gripping the handle so tight my knuckles ached. The footsteps stopped. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I lay there, my pulse hammering in my ears, waiting. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then, finally, I convinced myself it had been an animal. A deer, maybe. I waited a while longer, but the forest stayed silent. I didn't sleep much after that. By morning, I had almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe I had dreamed the footsteps. Maybe the silence of the forest had played tricks on me. Then I stepped outside my tent. The ground around my campsite was covered in footprints. Not animal tracks, human, bare feet. The prints circled my tent, stopping just inches from where my head had been inside. Deep impressions, like someone had been standing there just watching. My stomach dropped. My mouth went dry. I packed up my gear in record time, stuffing everything into my bag without bothering to organize it. I kept my knife in my hand the whole time. The hike out felt longer than it had on the way in. Every few minutes, I looked over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone following me. But the forest was empty, just trees and silence. When I finally saw my car through the trees, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I jogged the last stretch, yanked open the door, and threw my pack into the passenger seat. Then I saw them, footprints, there, leading away from my car. I never camped alone again.